Hello everyone. Today we're talking about a guy who gave up everything to live in the wild. Have you ever thought about leaving everything behind? No phones, no school, no job, no social media, no responsibilities, just you and nature. Most people have imagined it at least once, but very few have actually done it. One of those people was Christopher McCandless. His story is one of the most fascinating, inspiring, and controversial real life adventures ever told. Some people see him as a hero who chased freedom. Others think he's made a series of dangerous mistakes, but regardless of what you believe, his history is unforgettable. This is the story of the young man who walked into the Alaskan wilderness and never came back. Christopher McCandless was born in 1968 in California and grew up in a middle-class family. From the outside, his life looked almost perfect. He was intelligent, athletic, and earned excellent grades in school. His parents expect him to have a successful career and live a comfortable life, but Christopher felt different. As he grew older, he became frustrated with what he saw as society's obsession with money, status, and material possessions. He admired writers like Henry David Thoreau and Leo Tolstoy, who believed that happiness could be found through simplicity and independence. While many teenagers dream of expensive cars and big houses, Christopher dreamed about freedom. Real freedom. The kind of freedom that couldn't be bought. In 1990, Christopher graduated from college. His family assumed he would continue his education or bring a professional career. Instead, he shocked everyone. Without telling most of his friends or family, he donated nearly all of his savings to charity. When he packed a few belongings into his car and began traveling across the United States, he wanted to leave behind the life he knew and discover what life was really about. Soon after, he even abandoned his car. He left it behind and continued on foot. He burned the cash he still had with him. Imagine doing that. Most people panic when their phone battery dies. Christopher voluntarily gave up almost everything. As he traveled, he adopted a new name. He called himself Alexander Supertramp. To him, this wasn't just a nickname. It represented a new identity, a person free from society's expectations for the next 2 years. He wandered across America. He hitchhiked through deserts, worked temporary jobs, met strangers, slept outdoors, and experienced a lifestyle that most people could never imagine. Along the way, he met many people who were deeply impressed by him. They described him as intelligent, kind, and passionate. Some even treated him like a son. Many urged him to stay. But Christopher always continued moving. He believed his greatest adventure was still ahead. Eventually, he became obsessed with one destination, Alaska. To Christopher, Alaska represented the ultimate test, a place where nature was still wild and untouched, a place where he could survive completely on his own. On April of 1992, at just 24 years old, he arrived in Alaska, with very little equipment, very little food, and almost no experience surviving in such harsh conditions. Many people warned him that it was dangerous, but Christopher was determined. He believed that true freedom could only be found by facing nature alone. After hiking into wilderness, Christopher discovered an abandoned bus. The bus had once been used by workers in the area. For him, it became a shelter, a temporary home. Today, it will become famous around the world as a magic bus. At first, things seemed to go well. Christopher hunted small animals, gathered plants, read books, kept a journal, and enjoyed the solitude he had always wanted. For weeks, he lived almost completely isolated from the modern world. It looked like he had achieved his dream, but nature is unforgiving. As time passed, food became harder to find. The weather changed. The wilderness became more difficult. Christopher lost weight and a lot of weight. His journal entries became shorter and more concerning. At some point, he decided he wanted to leave. He attempted to return to civilization, but there was a problem. A river that had been relatively easy to cross earlier in the season had become much larger because of melting snow. The current was too strong. He couldn't get across, so he returned to the bus, trapped. alone, running out of food. Over the following weeks, his conditions worsened. Exactly what caused his death remains debated even today. Some experts believe starvation was the primary cause, others think poisonous plants may have contributed. But what is certain is that Christopher became weaker and weaker. His final journal entries show that he understood the seriousness of his situation. In August of 1992, hunters discovered the abandoned bus. Inside, they found Christopher McCandles. He had died alone in the wilderness. He was only 24 years old. Most stories will end there, but Christopher's story was just the beginning. News of his adventures spread across the country. People became fascinated by the young man who had abandoned everything to search for meaning. Some view him as a courageous, a person who refused to live a life he didn't believe in. Others argue that he was unprepared and reckless. They believe his death could have been avoided. Even today, people continue debating his choices. Was he brave? Or was he naive? The answer depends on who you ask. Years later, his story became even more famous through the book Into the Wild by John Crocker. The book was eventually adapted into the movie Into the Wild. Thousands of people traveled to Alaska hoping to see the famous bus for themselves. Some even risked their lives trying to reach it. Because of safety concerns, the bus was eventually removed from the wilderness. Yet, the legend remained. Christopher McCandles left behind a question that still resonates today. What does it mean to live a meaningful life? Is happiness found through comfort and security, or through adventure and freedom? His journey didn't provide a clear answer, but maybe that's why people still talk about him decades later. Because his story forces us to think about our own lives, about the things we truly value, and about how far we'd be willing to go in search of freedom. Christopher McCandles wanted to escape the world. Instead, he became one of the most unforgettable stories in it. And that's in the story of the young man who walked into the Alaska wilderness and became a legend. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you in next videos.